one of the big joys that we had, Mia, on campus were watching it, and they were all men. So let's say I'm talking about when we were pretty much all men. Carol and her group were really one of the first women to really implant themselves, fortunately, on Lincoln's campus. But I did enjoy the questions because they gave me an opportunity to reflect on my life in a way that I haven't done in quite a while. And the family life, the whole elementary and secondary school. So I'm just going to sort of take it in a sort of a biographical way. I'm really a Virginia family. My mother's family is from Southampton in Sussex, Virginia, which is why most of them are in Newport News and Hampton right now. My father's family is from the western part of Virginia, Buena Vista, if you can imagine a place called Buena Vista. And my father's family migrated to Washington, D.C. in the First World War. And my mother migrated to Washington, D.C. in the Second World War. And they met there and married. My father was a minister. He'd gone to Howard University, so he knew a lot of people at Lincoln. He'd gone to Union Theological Seminary, which was a great seminary at that time. He subsequently went to Yale. But he was a scholar minister, and he loved churches, and he loved Black institutions. And he told me one time that he became a minister because he wanted to do something that he would totally be dependent on Black folks, which he was. But what was interesting about my upbringing was this dichotomy between the urban and the rural. My father was totally urban. I mean, people were from DC, they drank, they sweared, they partied. And of course, he was a minister. So when you would look at my family, you would think of him as being pious. He wasn't really that pious. He was an urban minister. But my mother was very pious. She grew up on a farm in Cortland, Virginia. She went to Virginia State. And one of the major influences on me as a child, and I'm sure, unfortunately, a lot of you young Lincoln people today probably don't have this, is going south every summer to go to your grandparents' farm. And every summer, until we got old enough to work, which is 14 or 15, we would be piled in the car and we drive down to Virginia. My parents would stay a couple of days and drop us off, and then they'd come back a week or so. Maybe they come back in July for a few days, and they come back a week or so. And I lived with my grandparents. Now, it was a 19th century existence. My grandparents didn't get electricity until I was 13 years old. So I was used to lamps going into the home. They had a 75-acre farm. I was used to going out in the fields. And they were very religious. They prayed every morning. When they got up, they were on their knees. When they went to bed, they were on their knees. We had an Aunt Inez who lived with us for a while, and she was holiness. And one day we're out in the fields chopping cotton, and she falls out. And I said to my Uncle Critty, I said, "What's wrong with Aunt Inez?" And he said, "Oh, the Holy Spirit got her." The Holy Spirit? He says, "Yes, she's holiness. And the Holy Spirit can get you at any time." Now, I was used to shouting. My father was a Methodist church with a Baptist congregation. So we were used to people getting the Holy Spirit. So that was very interesting to spend my summers with one leg in the 19th century, and then to come back to, at that time, I was living in Baltimore. My father's first positions were in the Baptist church. And as a young child, I was in Charleston. But Bishop Edgar A. Love, who was one of the founders of Omega Psi Phi, called him up one day and said, "We are trying to get educated ministers in the Methodist church, because with Baptists, you could be educated, but there was the tradition of people being in the plow, and all of a sudden the Lord hits them and they go found a church." It didn't mean they were any less religious or powerful or charismatic, but Bishop Love wanted to get ministers who had degrees in theology and religion. So he convinced my parents to move to Baltimore, where they could get a series of churches. And that's really how we ended up in Baltimore. And in Baltimore, I was very involved, of course, in the civil rights movement. It was a lot of fun. You'd get arrested. You're under 18. Your parents show up in time. My father had the collar, and they would let you out. I had a lot of fun. The Mitchell family were leading that, and we had two Mitchells that went to Lincoln University. Kiefer Mitchell was 2 years ahead of me. He became a doctor. Michael Mitchell was, I think, a year and a half behind me, and he became a politician in Baltimore. So at the minute the schools integrated, we're now going into the 11th grade. I was really excited about going to a school called Poly, a big white school. And my parents looked at me and said, "No, you're not going there." And I said, "What do you mean I'm not going there?" They said, "You're going to boarding school." I said, "Boarding school?" He says, "Yes, you're going to Voorhees School in Denmark, South Carolina." Naturally, my father knew the president, who was a good Q. And my parents said to me, "We're not going to let you to be a guinea pig as one of the first Black students in these big white schools. They're going to wipe them out. They're going to wipe them out." And I thought to myself, I mean, now remember, I'm 14 years old. I'm thinking to myself, oh, well, we fought this hard to get in these schools, and now I'm not going to go to one. And my parents were very clear about it. So I went off to Denmark, South Carolina. It was an interesting school because it was also a junior college. And I lived there. And what we had were Northerners, and the school had a contract to educate the Black students in the area. And what was interesting about Voorhees, it was a Booker T. Washington school. The founder was a sickly woman who built the school. It was burned down 3 times by the white folks. She went to Tuskegee for 2 years, and she was going to educate. And Booker T. Washington sent one of his acolytes named Menifee, said, "Go help that woman out." And he went and married her. And when he married her, then he began to add a lot of structure to the school. And she met this very wealthy man named Voorhees in New Jersey, who was blind. He was a senator. And he was the one that gave the initial money to build several buildings. And it became Voorhees, and it was a part of the Episcopal Church. And I loved it there. I loved it there because half of our teachers were PhDs. At that time, back in the day, it was difficult for PhDs to get placed. So half of the people that were teaching me in high school had PhDs in their subject, and the other half were on their way to getting some higher form of education. So we got out in May. Why did we get out before the other schools got out in Baltimore? Because our teachers had to sign up for summer courses at Harvard and Penn and the University of Chicago, because when they came back the next year, the first thing they told us in class is about what they did during the summer and what they studied during the summer. So it was a very rigorous academic experience. And a couple of things happened. Number one, the notion that country kids are stupid got wiped out immediately. We had kids who were from students, actually, who were from the cotton fields of Denmark, South Carolina, who were so bright. And I realized later they were so bright because the elementary school had a contract to privately educate them with another Black-owned group. So they really got a fine education in a segregated environment. So I got kicked out. Of course, I led a protest. The food was terrible, and I said, we need some better food. And so we all dumped our food one day. It was a big brouhaha, and Dr. Potts called me in and said, "We're throwing you out. I'm calling your father." I was all packed. Everybody was saying, "Oh man, hope you come back." And I was sort of numb. I'm like, I'm being thrown out because I want better food. And then then Dr. Potts called me into his office and says, "I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't ruin your life for this. So I'm going to put you in detention for a week. You just go to class and go back to your room. We'll bring you the food." I said, "Fine." The food was much better that they brought me in my dorm. I was perfectly prepared to stay. But at the end of the day, I ended up being the class speaker to at graduation. I was the one that gave the talk. And believe it or not, I wanted to be an orthodontist. Don't ask me why. And I told my parents, I want to be an orthodontist. They said, fine, you need to go to Howard. So I applied to Howard and I got into Howard pre-dental. And then I had a dream. You know, Kendrick Lamar in his latest album has that. I had a dream. Malcolm had a dream. I had a dream. I wanted to be a minister. And it was really intense. I mean, it was like, well, I wouldn't say like, you know, a religious experience, but it was a semi-religious. So I got on the phone, you know, you got to call collect. And I called dad and I said, look, I've got bad news. He said, what? I said, I don't think I want to be a dentist. I think I want to be a minister. And my father said, oh, I am so happy. You got to go to Lincoln. So I said, Lincoln? He said, yeah, Langston Hughes, whom we knew and stayed with us when he went to Lincoln. So I said, okay, let's go to Lincoln. So my dad called Dean McRae, another Q, and said, call Dr. Potts. My son is not going to be going to Howard. He'd like to come to Lincoln. He wants to be a minister. So Dean McRae called the president of my boarding school. And you know what they talked about? Character. And they said, well, what I found this out later. What kind of character does he have? We know he can do the academic work. And Potts said he had a very good character. He led a revolt here about food. It was very effective. I threw him out and then I had second thoughts. But I think he'll be okay with you guys. He's a lot older. So McRae calls my dad back and says, okay, he's in. So meanwhile, my mother is concerned because I'm back in Philly telling my family doctor, who was a Lincoln man, I got into Lincoln. I had no paper. So my mother said, it's August. You haven't got a piece of paper from the college saying you admitted. My dad, he's in. So he called Dean McRae, and of course, they had forgotten to send me the stuff. They send it in, I fill it up. Of course, I get a letter saying I'm in. I'm saying that to say that in the world that I grew up in 55 years ago, it was a very small group of middle-class Black folks who knew each other through the years, who looked out for each other, and almost everything that was done was informal. Like, oh, your boy wants to come? Let's check him out. How is his grades? Let's talk about his character. Maybe he'll make it, maybe he won't. And then people would decide, okay, let's bring him in. So it was very, very informal. Now I'm 16 years old. So I arrived at Lincoln University. I'm 16 years old. I'm all excited. I know it's all male and I know all the great people that went to Lincoln. And my parents drive me in. And then they say to my mother, oh, Mrs. Franklin, he'll be fine. We're going to look after him. He'll be great. The minute my parents leave, they see the car leave and gets on the pike. They look at me and said, dog, get up and come take my bags. And I'm like, what's going on? I didn't understand the hazing. We had a hazing process where you wore beanies. You've heard of that. As a freshman, you couldn't walk on the grass. You had to go to the chapel. First you had to organize your class and go to the chapel. And we had something called wood night, where you would line up and go to a wood pile, and the upperclassmen were beating up on you, trying to break the line. And then in the end, you threw your beanie on the pile and sang the alma mater. Well, one of the things you had to do as a freshman was sing the alma mater, and upperclassmen would stop you at any moment and say, sing the alma mater. And you had to start singing the alma mater. And no one did anything. Professors would walk by and look at you and keep going while they're dressing you down. And I'm thinking, you know, I come from Voorhees. Professors are looking the halls at night to see if the lights are out. But what I didn't understand, I had left Booker T. Washington's idea, and I had entered W.E.B. Du Bois's Talented Tenth. And the Talented Tenth was the exact opposite of what the culture was at Voorhees. At Voorhees, everything was very restricted. You had a time to do this, a time to do that. At Lincoln, nothing was restricted. The professors went home at night. and the students ran the school. And that built a certain resilience in everyone, that we were in charge of almost everything that had to do with student life. I don't know how well it worked, but it wasn't that bad. So I'm 16 years old. I'm there. Everybody's screaming at me, all the upperclassmen, and they'd say, "Where you from, freshman?" And I'm 16. Everybody's 17. I said, "I'm from Bmore." Bmore. Yes, I'm from Baltimore. Oh, Baltimore. So finally, my roommate said I had to be more clean. My professor said I should be more studious. And my Rabble name became sort of an existential sense of who I was. And I decided to hell with it. I'm going to be called Be More. And that became my Rabble name. And Rabble names were double-edged swords because some people hated them. A few years later, not a few years, 30 years later, I'm in the supermarket with my wife, whom I met in Baltimore and followed to Philadelphia. She was my girlfriend then. And there was Gonzilla. Gonzilla looked just like Gonzilla. He was this big, dark guy with big eyes.
Yeah.
And we called him Gonzilla, right?
Yeah.
David Rains.
Thank you. I was so excited. I ran over to my wife. I said, "Pat, I want you to meet Gonzilla." And you could see his face tighten when I said Gonzilla. And he looked at me and said, "David Rains." And I said, "Oh, yeah, yeah, David Rains." And I realized then that the rabble was good in some ways and bad. And I ended up, and I thought to myself, what would it be like to go through Lincoln for 4 years and people call you Monster Mash, or people call you Gonzilla, and you can't do anything about it. You have to live with it, or go to Morehouse. That was the option. And we had certain myths on campus. One was that apparently, and Dean McCrae said he never said this, that in the freshman class, you shook hands with the guy in front of you, the guy on each side of you, the guy behind you. And the dean of the college said, "Two of you will not be here to see the grass turn green." Now, what did that mean to me? It meant that in the spring, when the grass turned green, two of these guys are going to punch out after qualifying to get into Lincoln. And I was mystified by that. And sure enough, spring, a lot of people didn't return. And it was only 25 years out of Lincoln that I understood how destructive that concept was. That concept was there because we had more freshmen than would ever fit on the campus. I mean, we didn't have motels. Lincoln was in the middle of the cornfields. And the freshmen lived in McCrary Hall, which was the largest hall at that time. If every one of them passed, and you had 60 or 70 people graduating that June, you wouldn't have room to house everybody. So the institutional response was to grade things on a curve. So, we had a lot of classes where they look at everybody and they grade you on a curve. Now, I thought that was pretty cool to be graded on a curve, but when 25 years later, I began to think about it and say, wait a minute, that was wrong. If they couldn't house people, why did they invite those many people in, grade everybody on a curve, and throw 20% of them out, no matter what? So I had a lot of issues with that. But when I was there, I wasn't sophisticated enough to understand, how that worked. But hopefully we have enough now to keep everyone, if they make the grade, to actually stay in campus. The other point here, she has Lincoln University experiences. I guess the greatest influence were the African students, because we had a large number of African students, and we had a good deal from countries that were fighting for their independence. We had an African center that had a contract with the State Department to bring in people from Angola, from South Africa, from Zimbabwe, from Zambia, and these Mozambique,
Oh, Botswana.
Botswana. And these folks had actually taken guns, right? And fired at people for their independence. And I remember there was a guy named Lazarus Dubé. He was from South Africa and he lived across the hall from me. And he was drinking beer one night, which was unusual. That was very brave, but he's like 28 years old. And I went in his room and I talked to him and he said, you American Negroes, you are so fortunate. You are, and he started telling me, and here we are, King is still alive. We're fighting to get the 64 voting rights bill through. They've just bombed the girls in Birmingham, Alabama. So I'm feeling pretty down at this point. And this guy starts telling me about making bombs, about friends being killed. And then he rips off his shirt and shows me a hole in his back where he was shot. I was freaked out. It became very real. And the African students had a certain dignity and seriousness that made all of us straighten up because we were trying to be cool, but these guys were really fighting for the independence of their country. And then, and they were academic. So you'd be trying to play bid whist and they'd be saying, no, I got to go to the library. I got a country to liberate. You sort of think to yourself, it's Thursday night, not even Saturday or Friday, and I'm going to spend a couple hours playing bid whist. You know what you did? You picked up your books and you went to the library because you knew that guy was serious. That guy was real. You're trying to liberate your people in America. He's trying to create a country. So having the African students on campus was an intellectual and emotional anchor to the rest of us who were there. Next thing, the next point is white professors. I had never had white teachers. All my teachers were Black. And so I remember when our freshman class, we were really uptight about the fact that we had a white president. And that became a big point. Oh, we got a white president. And people said, why don't we have a Black president? We've had too many white presidents. And one thing built up and built up. And we had this smiling little man named Dr. Wachman. And we had a tennis court. Remember that? In the middle of the campus, like in front of Rendell Hall. And we had a guy from my class named Baxter Smith. If you go to his Facebook page, he's still there with the tennis racket. He also ran for vice president of the United States of the Socialist Workers Party. And was an international journalist and is a guy he lives in California. You guys should hear from him. He has a lot of interesting things to say and an interesting perspective on world events. And we had I shouldn't say little, but I'm going to say it, a little guy from Japan named Kuni Takeuchi. And Kuni always played tennis, and I'm sure he majored in physics and chemistry and all that. Kuni and Baxter Smith played tennis like forever. And one day, Dr. Wachman sent a note saying, I can understand you gentlemen not wanting to having a white president. And since this is a gladiator school, I'd like to challenge the best tennis player to have a match. And everybody said, Kuni Takeuchi, because he was an upperclassman. Baxter was a freshman. Kuni said, yeah, I'll whip his ass. I'll whip his ass. So we showed up. Dr. Wachman came out in a little sweater. He was smiling. He whipped Takeuchi's ass, 6-0, 6-0. Kuni was falling all over the court. His tongue was hanging out. He was sweating. Dr. Wachman never took off his sweater. And then he went over and told him he played a great match, and we were stunned. because sure, we had a white president, but we had a white president that was on the Olympic tennis team. And everybody felt, all right, he's got chops. So he's got chops. So that solved that problem. And now that was the all male world that you you had to show what you had.
Oh yeah.
And Dr. Walkman was up in his office, he'd give talks. But when he showed up on that tennis court and took Cooney, the best player, out, then we said, all right, we don't want the next one to be black. So that was a good lesson because we didn't know anything about this guy. We didn't have Wikipedia. And when he came out and kicked that boy, we said, we better rethink this. So one of the things we learned was critical thinking. And that was a good lesson in critical thinking, jumping to it. And then other Lincoln experiences were just a rough and tumble of being in an all-male university with 8 women. And the 8 women were the queens of the campus. The guys, every guy wanted to kind of like, get close to all the women, all the 8 women on campus. And to their credit, they were like Carol and all of them. They were beautiful. They were smart. They were a part of it's like they kind of melt in. They didn't rabble on you like the guys. They didn't have the mouth like the guys, but they kind of fit in. And pretty soon they were just a part of the Lincoln family. Everybody was still trying to get close to them, but the point is they were a part of the Lincoln family. In academic honors, I guess my biggest honor was the debating prize. I loved I played tennis and I got a letter, and I think they were very kind to give me a letter, an L letter. I still have it for tennis. I don't have enough pride to put it on a sweater in case someone challenges me to a match, but I do have it, and my son was very impressed when he realized I had a letter in tennis. But I still won't play him. I still won't play him much. But I guess my greatest pride was being on the Lincoln debating team. And we would go up against all these white schools. We would travel to New York. In fact, when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, our team was in a debating tournament at Villanova University. And it was the topic was whether or not the government should fund private or religious schools. And we didn't care what position we had. In the debating club, they'd say, you argue today, and this afternoon, you argued the different. The important thing was, how the heck do you construct your argument, and how do you answer in rebuttal? And all of a sudden, I'm in the middle. I think I was speaking on maybe Herbie St. Clair, who was the best. He was a guy, he was an upperclassman. He was the best debater I'd ever seen. He's in the middle, and the bell rings. And over the loudspeaker, someone says, the President Kennedy has been shot. We asked everyone to go to the chapel. And we kind of looked at each other. And we kind of walked, here we are at a Catholic school, to the chapel. And people were doing rosaries and praying and crying, and we were freaked. We were kind of crushed. So we got our bus. We came back to school. I couldn't go home. I ended up spending a few days in Philadelphia with my roommate there, Al Carroll, who passed away, at his home. But the debating team, and because we knew Nkrumah was on the debating team, Ezekwe was on the debating team, Thurgood Marshall was on the debating team, Reverend James Robinson, who I'll talk about, was on the debating team. So being on that debating team. The other thing I liked about Lincoln, and I'll amplify it when I talk a bit about Oxford, is that I could walk in buildings that I knew Nkrumah was in, or Thurgood Marshall, or I knew great men, and they were men, and I'm saying great men specifically, but great men had walked through the portals and had changed the world. And that gave me a sort of I don't know, a feeling of belonging and a feeling of what greatness felt like. At least you can begin if you are in Nkrumah's room in Houston Hall and you're sitting there, you kind of want to study because you want to keep the integrity of the room and the buildings going. So that was also an important thing. And then there was Omega Psi Phi. My father was a Q Alpha chapter. Everyone I knew when I was growing up was a Q. And I went to the first smoker they had was Kappa, and I went to the dinner, and Johnny Anderson, who was a great city councilman, spoke, and he gave the best speech about Kappa. I said, I'm gonna be a Kappa. And I called my father and I said, well, I got bad news. He's going like, what's he gonna be now? And I said, I don't think I'm gonna be Q, I'm gonna be a Kappa. And he said, well, as long as you're a good frat man, it doesn't matter to me. Just make sure. And of course, when the Qs had their smoker, I was all in. So I became a Q and I became the bossless. And unusually, the bossless is the head person, but unusually, I was doing it. I did it for 2 years. So I became a bossless right after I got in. We had a woman named Sister Wilson, who you'll hear the cues.
Sister Lottie Wilson.
Sister Wilson, Lottie Wilson. And she was old and she had helped the Qs get started. And she was the only woman member of the fraternity. And every Lampardo had to go down to her room and to go down to her place in the village. And she's in the bed, and everyone made it seem like a mystical experience. And with Lampardos would walk in, and she had a way of speaking in parables. And she said, I see the next basilisk in this room. And I knew she was talking about me. It was very weird. And I thought to myself, damn, she's talking about me as the next basilisk. I didn't run for it, but I was elected basilisk. And I think part of it was that Sister Wilson had sort of said, he's a good guy. He should be the basilisk. I wasn't a great basilisk, but I at least tried to keep some of the fellas from killing some of the pledgees that were coming through the door, because at that time, the job was to kind of really terrify you, and my goal was you can't beat a good brother. You can terrify a good brother psychologically, but to do that, you've got to be creative, you've got to be intelligent, and you've got to think about it. It's kind of easy to pound somebody. What kind of brains does that take? And maybe a good story later. So we kind of put it down a little bit, but serving as Omega Psi Phi was bossless was just fabulous. And then I became vice president of the Student Government Association. And I served under a man named Donald Lambright, who was the president of this. He was a very brilliant guy. He was the son of Stephen Fetchit, who was at that time, who wasn't at that time, he was despised at that time. But in the 20s and 10s, he was a big movie actor, and he had all the characteristics. Stepp and Fetchit made a lot of money. But Lambright was raised by a prominent doctor in Detroit. And what's so interesting is he was the first mass killer we had at Lincoln University that I know of. I was coming back from Boston. I'd been doing work in Britain. Coming back, I flew into Boston to fly to Philadelphia, and I picked up the New York Times. And on the front page, it said 10 people killed on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. And I'm like, oh. And I began to read it, and it was Donald Lambright. And I said, wait a minute. He apparently decided the only way for Black people was to kill 10 white people. So he got a gun. He killed his wife first, if you're going to be consistent. And then he'd been in the Air Force. He'd been a marksman. He consistently tried to kill 10 white people on the expressway before he killed himself. And I was floored. I got on the plane back to Philadelphia. I was really catatonic. So I started calling people like, what do you know? and everybody was catatonic. But he was a brilliant guy. He would get all A's one semester and punch out the next semester. So his intelligence was very volatile, but he was very charismatic. So you have to take the good with the bad. And I'm going to tell you as much as with as much honesty as I can, uh, the good and the bad. And it's so interesting when you reflect because we all grew as a result of Lambright's mass killing. We realized we couldn't do it, and it's not the way to go. A high point was going on Operations Crossroads Africa. That was a program founded by Reverend James Robinson, class of 23, who was a minister. And he founded this program to send students to work in various African countries. It was a forerunner to the Peace Corps. And he advised President Kennedy and Sergeant Shriver, who was putting the Peace Corps together, of how to put it together. A guy named David Clawson, who's still around, Dr. David Clawson, and I spent the summer in 1964. I'm 17 now. In 1964, I was in Malawi. He went to Ethiopia. And the beauty of that was on July 7th in 1964, I am in the stadium in Nyasaland, and the British flag goes down and the Malawi flag goes up. So I had the experience of celebrating with a country that had gotten its independence, Malawi. And so that was a great impact on me to be able to do that. And then and then I went off and then I graduated, of course, and did that. I want to be worried of time because Pivar, you should be my timekeeper here. But so then when I'm at Lincoln, we had a relationship with Princeton. You know, Lincoln always had a relationship with Princeton. And I was an econ major, and we didn't really have anybody that could teach econ other than the rudimentary, the element or the primary courses. And I had this professor from Princeton, very dry, very nice man, you know, with sort of a sweater, you know, that was, you know, had sort of holes in the elbows. And he says to me at the end of my senior year, he says, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I'm probably going to go to Howard Law School." He says, "Do you want to go to law school?" I said, "No, but I have to do something." He says, "Why don't you go to Cambridge University?" And I said, "Cambridge University? Cambridge?" I said, "No, that's too hard." He said, "What about Edinburgh University?" I said, "Yeah, okay." And believe it or not, I got a scholarship to go to Edinburgh University to do a degree in African studies. And my tutor there was a guy from Cambridge. And about a month in, he said, "I think you should go to Cambridge. You'll be happier than here." I said, "What? Cambridge? Somebody else suggested Cambridge." He said, "You should go to Cambridge." And I met a guy who went to Oxford, and I said, "To hell with it, I'm going to Oxford." So you apply to 4 colleges. And so I filled out the application. The first college turns me down. The second college was a college called Magdalen. They invited me down. I take the train to London. I go to Magdalen College, beautiful college. They interview me. They say, "No, no, no, you're not right for us. You should go to Lincoln College." Or Lincoln College was my third choice because I went to Lincoln University. I go to Lincoln College and the guy goes, "No, no, we don't think you'll be happy here. We won't take you." My fourth choice was a college called Balliol College, which was the best college at Oxford academically. It always got the most first. It was founded in 1263. Listen to this, 1263. Adam Smith went there. Most prime ministers from Britain went there. The present prime minister, Boris Johnson, went up to Balliol. And I realized, I said, "Oh shit, I'm never getting in here." So they asked me to come for an interview. I go back to Edinburgh. I come back down. All these people I met at Oxford said, "No, you'll never get in. Just relax." I said, "Fine." I go to the interview. I recognize all these top people in African affairs, top people. I've read their books. I don't know them personally. And the master of the college, who is a Marxist historian, leans forward, they have on their gowns, and he says, Mr. Franklin, can you explain Dr. Pauli's quantum mechanic theory of spinning atoms? And I thought, hell, I said, of course. And I'm very glad you asked me that question. And I talked for 20 minutes. No one said a word. They just stared at me. And finally, Sir Christopher Hill said, well, go to the pub and get a drink. So I go to the pub and I tell the lady, I said, well, I'm being turned down from Balliol. She said, that's all right. 95% of the people that apply get turned down. I said, okay. So I go back and they're all having sherry and the master says, we'll take you. And I said, now I've had a drink. I'm a son of a minister, so I wasn't to a straight drink. And I said, what? He said, we'll take you, have some sherry, meet the Don. So I'm thanking everybody and they're being, So as we're walking out, I said to them, you're taking me? They said, yes. I said, what is Dr. Pauli's quantum mechanic theory of spinning atoms? And the master of the college looked at me and said, we don't know. We're taking you because you don't know anything. And I fell back. They're taking me because I don't know anything. Now, isn't that the exact opposite of what you would expect from someone at a great university taking you because you know so much? These guys said, and so when I was a whole long story, but I went there, I got a Woodrow Wilson fellowship. I won't go into all that. But finally, I met with him about 2 months in, and I said, I'm really enjoying and I really did dig it. I loved it. And I said, but I still don't understand why you took me. He said, we just wanted to figure out if you could think on your feet, if you could think well on your feet, and if you could create a totally fictitious answer and connect the dots in such a way that it made sense. Then we knew we could teach you something. So I was like, whoa. But after I'd gotten in, they told me I was in, I was going to get a letter. I was so happy. I was singing to myself. And the first Black person I saw was a guy named Jim Funa, class of 64 from Sierra Leone. Jim Funa said, be more. And I turned around and there's Jim Funa. I said, Jim, what are you doing here? He said, I'm doing a PhD here. What are you doing here? I said, I just got into Balliol to read a B. Phil. He goes, congratulations. And then we went and had dinner. We spoke for 6 hours and Funa broke it all down. He explained the culture, what's demanded, how to act. And Jim Funa from Sierra Leone was a part of the Commonwealth. He'd gone to boarding school in Britain and he didn't want to go to Oxford or Cambridge. He wanted to come to Lincoln. That was his first choice. He went to Chatham Hall, one of the top boarding schools in Britain. His parents were very wealthy from Sierra Leone. And there he was at Lincoln University. And he said, oh, I love Lincoln. I love it. I loved it. He went to Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy and did a master's in economics and did his PhD at Oxford, went back to Sierra Leone and became head of the central bank. Now, I knew Africans were sophisticated, but I never knew that much about him. So I had a good time there. I spent a lot of time in the Oxford Union, having a ball in Kingskill. And when Kingskill, that present a real crisis because here I am living large and you are living large there. You have a manservant that looks after you. In fact, when I arrived at my first room, this guy is unpacking my bags. I said, wait a minute, whoa. You don't have to unpack my bags. I do it myself. I know how to take care of myself. And as he's unpacking my bags, he says, sir, my grandfather was a scout to blah, 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 my great-grandfather. He said, my job is to teach you how to be a gentleman. I'm like, oops, okay, teach me how to be a gentleman. So, but Kingskill, and I quit. I went to the master. I said, this is ridiculous. I shouldn't be here. I'm a phony. I hate this. I love the place. And he said, no. You should not resign. You should go back and lead the revolution and then come back. And I'm like, what? So they gave me a leave. I went and worked for Hubert Humphrey. We know that didn't turn out so well. And after Hubert Humphrey left, I went back and finished. But I do want to say that I'm on a plane going across the country like 15 years later. I have the New York Times and I look in the obituaries, and that fella who was teaching me labor economics was chairman of the economics department at Princeton. I had no idea. He was just a nice guy, smart. He was chairman, and no wonder he could say, go to Cambridge. All he had to do was pick up the phone and say, I got this guy from the oldest black college in the country, and I think you'd be well at Cambridge. But I was very fortunate. I got into Oxford on my own. I was so upset because I never wrote him a note. I never kept in touch, never told him what I was doing in life, that when I got back home, I hunted down his widow and I went up to Princeton and I took her to lunch and I fell on my sword and I said, I'm an idiot. This is what your husband did for me. He made me believe I could stretch myself because I'm thinking, DC. He made me believe I never kept up. And she was very grateful. I was in touch with her until she passed away. I even went to her funeral because I never took the time to thank the people who gave me a leg up. So that's important for all of you to learn. So I go to Philadelphia. My wife's there. I've made films as it's almost time. I made films. I um, was at University of Pennsylvania. Carol was in law school, and I did film festivals there because I was working for the president. Because Black people needed the opportunity to see historical films. Superfly, it was a boom in the Black film business. They're making a lot of money for Hollywood. And the question I always ask is, what are the second and third quarter questions? What do I need to do? I have a venue. So we did Black film festivals. We ended up making films. I made one with Mark. I'll talk about that. I made a film on Lincoln University, a documentary. And the principle of that was when I went back 10 years later in 1976, no one knew the alma mater. It was a cultural shift. And the idea was to document that cultural shift that was taking place. I wasn't trying to say it was a terrible thing. I just wanted all of us to know that the male hunting party was over, that we have women, we have a different way of doing things. And the idea of I scratch your back, you scratch my back, the informal network that got me into Lincoln University, that was over because things were a much more equal playing field now. People had to compete from every spot. You can pick up the phone and call somebody and say, hey, my boy, what's like to come? Oh, yeah, good, Reverend. Is you a good guy? No, it didn't work anymore. So we did that. I worked for the mayor of the city of Philadelphia, which was a great. I was the arts commissioner. I was the chief of protocol. And what I loved about that job was the first time I met everyday white people. I mean, white people who lived in the Northeast. All the white people that I met were all elites. They were professors, they were Oxford British, they were this, they were that. And all of a sudden, I'm working for the city and people are coming into the door with a complaint and their language is terrible and they're splitting their verbs. And I'm thinking, oh my God, these are everyday, normal white people. And you, my friend, haven't met many of them. So that really helped me open my mind. And from that, I went into the investment business. Now, why? Because one day I'm walking out the mayor's office and these guys are coming out with a tan. They got good suits. I say, who's that? The mayor says they're asset managers. What's asset managers? I had no idea. And he says, oh, they manage our pension funds. I'm like, whoa. So I began to look into it and think about it and do research and network. I left the mayor, hired by a firm that managed stocks. and I said, even though I'm 34, I'll take a grunt job. I spent 2 years learning the business. Very boring. looking at stocks, writing reports and all that. And one day I heard the head of the firm talking about Milwaukee. And I said to him, what do we have to do? He says, we're trying to get a $50 million account. I said, well, I know the mayor of Milwaukee because I knew him from, being, let me go out and talk to him. I tell him what I'm doing. He tells me what to do. I go talk to them. We put it in. One thing leads to another. We get the account. I get paid for it. And the guy says, put your pencil down. You're now vice president. And then I went from there to Fidelity Investments in Boston, where I was a senior vice president. And what was so interesting was we had two Black guys, and we had all these highly intelligent young Black people way down in the bowels of the place. And a British guy, Lord Walker, came to look at British banks, and he said, how come I don't see many Black people in senior positions? I said, they need they need to order wine, they need to know, they need it. He says, well, why don't you send me someone? And that formed the City Fellows, where we created a program to send Black folks, and then eventually Hispanics, and eventually Native Americans to work in British investment banks. Most of them are still there, and they're doing very well. And we didn't incorporate. I funded it myself the first 2 years, which was a considerable expense. And the third year, we figured out what it cost, and we billed everybody in the program. In the fourth year, everyone paid less and less. Why? Because we shared the costs of the program. And that's really I think that was great, because to get people in my field, you must be able to have a global conversation because capital is global. I teach them the master narrative. Learn one good restaurant. If you go into Hungary for a meeting, what do people do? They go out and eat. Find one good restaurant, study it, go in the kitchen, learn everything. So when you're at a cocktail party and the chairman's wife says, I'm going to Hungary, I'm going to Budapest, you can say, oh, you should try the blah blah restaurant. It specializes in. You need to understand how you communicate with people who are dealing with large numbers of capital. That was very successful. When I was at Fidelity, Mandela had just gotten out of prison. And one of the things that he was asking was for people to come to South Africa. I asked the head of Fidelity Investments if we could put together a South African or African fund. He said, research. I took 6 people. We traveled all over Africa. We spent 6 months looking at everything. I went to him with the proposal, and he said, now, this is not for us, but we'll be your partner in doing it yourself. They paid me for 2 years. They took 25% of my business. They gave me their back office, their research. I pulled together a team. We were off and running, and we had the first US registered mutual fund to invest in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. And the goal was to do it for 3 years to prove it could be done and sell it, because we would always be too small. That was a great experience. And so we did that. I'm gonna just see you shouldn't get me started here now, because I'm gonna have to quit in a minute. I am the honorary British consul in Philadelphia. I was the first African American to have that title. It's a big deal in Britain, a Black man representing the Queen. I served at the pleasure of the Queen and the royal family, and then the Foreign Office, because you're appointed by the Crown. I knew enough people. They wanted somebody. I put up my hand. They said, you're it, done. And I didn't like being the only Black person. So I lobbied and I said, it's no good being the only Black. This is not a thing. And they found this magnificent woman in Cleveland, Sandra Morgan, and she became the first Black woman honorary British consul. So we were able to do that. I received an honor from the Queen, the officer of the British Empire, which is one of the honors that the Queen gives you. Everybody asked me, how did you get it? The question is, you don't tell them how you got it. You say, I don't know. The important thing is you have it. And it gives you a certain level of respect in Britain, because you can't apply for it. You've got to be able, someone has to say, this guy is someone that deserves to have this honor. So that was very, very exciting. I was named an honorary fellow of Balliol College 2 years ago. I'm doing a project on slavery now with the college. As a result of that, the second order question, what can we do? We have a 2.5 year program going for secondary school teachers to study the transatlantic slave trade. We want 10 from this area, 10 from Britain. They will go to Britain in June for a week, June 22, June 23. That British group will come here. So anyone that has any connections in Chester County, please let me know. We're looking. Most of it is going to be done online. This is going to be a fabulous program. They did a trailer, which Mark has, and they had the kora, which is a West African harp. Mark and I did a film on the kora 45 years ago. I sent them the film. They were excited. Now Mark and I are talking about bringing kora players from Gambia to Britain for a complete tour that will take place in September and October. So the only conclusion I have, I do want to have questions, is I hope everybody watched Biden last night. The speech was the most extraordinary State of the Union speech we've had in several generations. He's changing the social contract of this country, and it's important that everybody understand what he's doing. The world is changing. Climate change, gender equality, these are fundamental issues that we have to deal with. So that's enough. The only last thing I'm going to say is I'm putting this up, so I hope you can see it. The most extraordinary writer from Lincoln is a guy named Vincent O. Carter. None of you know about him because you don't study him. He's written a book, a novel. He's written an extraordinary philosophical book called The Burned Book. And if Lincoln will ever invite me back, I'd like to spend one day with senior English majors going over his novel, Such Sweet Thunder. That is what I'd love to do. So I know we have an English professor here. So I want to thank you. I can keep going, but I just want to thank you all for listening. It's been an exciting journey. The lesson is it does take luck, but most important, learn the business you're in. Learn it totally. Be very, very focused. And then once you learn the business, you can branch out and do other things. So good luck to all you Lincoln people. I know y'all are doing your homework because all of y'all got your pictures on there. So I hope that you're writing notes too as you're there. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Actually, students, if you have questions, now's the time.
Can you repeat that last quote you said? You said learn the business you're in, and once you learn the business,
learn
be
the
very
business
diligent.
first.
Mhm.
For instance, one of the trick bags Black people get into when they get in a company is they want to first become civil rights fighters. And that's important. They want to take the staff to task because we have enough Black people. They spend a lot of emotional energy, which is fine, advocating for equality, equity, and equality. But when it comes time to get that annual review, and the line manager says, well, you're very good on that, but your job is A, B, and C, and you're good on this, you're fairly good on that, and you get a ho-hum review, you're not doing us any favors. The first step is learn the business you're in. And that could be anything, whether it's a teacher or whether it's a doctor or whether it's a criminal justice person or a graduate student. Learn the business. Take a year or two, learn the business. And once your evaluation is high, then jump out there and start acting bad, because then people will listen to you because they know you know the business.
Could you elaborate, please, on your 10-person quota that you were talking about, the project this summer? Is that something we should be thinking about?
I think you should definitely think about it. I'll send you, Carol, just send me your email. I'll send it to you. We, Oxford and Cambridge and Britain, like the United States, is going through racial reckoning. And racial reckoning has to deal with the history. And the urtext of why we can't do anything here is that we don't come to grips with slavery. We don't know what it means. We don't know the impact of it. There was a big article in the Inquirer 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago about a creative writing teacher was trying to teach on slavery, and he wanted his students to imagine they were a slave and to write a letter to their master because they were about to be sold, and try to convince the master not to sell them. Now, I think it's okay to create empathy, which is what you want to do in creative writing. You can't be a writer if you don't have empathy for your subject, because you won't be able to draw anything out that will give people insight. So what happened? The Black students, the Black teachers, Black parents got very upset, and we get a big article in the Inquirer. And one of the things the Black teacher says was, I don't want my children traumatized. Well, yes and no. That teacher would have been better to have been an ex-slave who was in Philadelphia in 1830 and who's writing a letter back to the master saying why they left being a slave. But the reason that creative writing teacher didn't think of that, because that creative writing teacher hadn't read Frederick Douglass's letter to his master, which was a beautiful letter he wrote and was published in his newspaper to his master. That would have empowered people with empathy to do something. And the reason people don't know anything about slavery is that our teachers are screaming, secondary school teachers are screaming for information and pedagogy on how do we teach the transatlantic slave trade to secondary school teachers. I'm not talking about college kids. They can get it, all right? But I'm talking about 10th, 11th, and 12th graders who need to understand this stuff and who are also going through all these emotions because they're teenagers. How do you teach slavery and what impact it is? Same thing is happening in Britain. So we decided, and we're using the Museum of the American Revolution we decided to create something so we can get teachers online. And we have a great woman managing this thing, a great woman at the Museum of the American. Get them online, and they got to commit because it's a 2.5 year project. You'll do stuff online. They haven't, they're working it out now, starts in March. And then in June, to 10 of you, and we have the money together, we'll go to Oxford for a week, to Britain for a week. And, you'll travel to and you'll meet your counterparts that you've been talking to. You all get together, 20 of you, and you'll take trips and you'll talk about what are we going to do next year. And you'll come back and we'll go through the year. And then in June of 23, the British people will come to Philadelphia. See, and then we will let it go. And then in March, we'll finish it and everybody will get a certificate from Oxford. That's one way, I think, and I may be wrong, of trying to use an exhibition at my college at Oxford on slavery and really have the second and third order questions. What can we do? How can we do it? How can we get the resources? And am I in a position to move the process forward? So I'd be very grateful. We have people from the city of Philadelphia, like 3. I'd be very grateful if someone from Chester County or Delaware County in the school district. And we want people that deal with curriculum. So we want people with power because we want them to be the agent of change in their own institutions. That's what we're looking for. If we can get 10 here, they can impact 30, who can impact 60. And we can slowly get some systemic change on the teaching of the transatlantic slave trade. Yes, ma'am.
Brother Franklin.
Yeah.
Bill Wiggins here.
Hey, Bill.
Yeah, as a historian of over 45 years plus, I have 2 points to make. One deals with enslavement. I constantly remind individuals with all due respect that the history of African people is not the history of slavery. It is not the history of slavery. It's part of the history of African people. And I don't want individuals to simply look at slavery, I mean, high school, college, or elsewhere, as if that is all there was, as if it was the sine qua non, that without enslavement, there would be no history of African people and our descendants. So while it's important to look at the modern transatlantic enslavement trade, I've looked at it extensively and given lectures and the like, and was part of course, the commission here in Hampton for the 400th anniversary.
Yeah.
And also the fact that enslavement was an evolutionary process and it didn't occur all of a sudden in August 25th, 1619.
Right.
So that's one
1619.
point to keep in mind. So I don't want, every time I turn around, slavery. What about the rest of the history? Because it was more than that. That was horrible, obviously. Now, the other point is, I mean, before you respond to that, so you can think for a moment, if you will, what did you think of brother Senator Tim Scott? We know what.
You mean
President Reagan
America?
said.
You mean America is not a racist country?
Yeah, that fool. I'm sorry. Yes.
Well, he's got to get. First of all, your first question is very important, and I'm going to answer it. But Tim Scott has to get reelected by Southern evangelicals from South Carolina. If he said America is a racist country, or we have systemic racism, like our president said, he'd be done. He would never be reelected. I thought he made a very weak response.
Yeah.
Because most Republicans like what Biden said about free education for junior college and free preschool education. They liked it. So I mean, he was okay. Your point.
Yeah, but let me just say he deserves a good butt whipping, but go ahead.
Your point is that no, we're not starting with the transatlantic slave trade. I think we're going to start with Mansa Musa. And I think Mansa Musa is good because what we're trying to talk about is value. And you know, Mansa Musa was a Muslim. He was the wealthiest man in the world in the known world at that time. And there is a marvelous book called A Fish Full of Shells, which is written by a British historian, which looks at Africa before the slave trade and the impact of the slave trade on the various communities in Africa. And so we are not starting, and your point is well taken. This is not about, the transatlantic slave trade came out of nowhere. This is about studying Spain, the Popal Bull. This is about studying Britain and what happened. But anyway, your point is well taken. And I want to assure you that we aren't going to make it the sine non qua, the alpha and omega of it. We're going to start back in Africa and talk about the Europeans' first introduction to Africa.
And I don't want to take any more time. Actually, everybody else needs to get a chance to say something. But I would go back even before Ghana, Mali, and Songhai and Mansa.
Well, Songhai was Songhai.
Go all the way back. Go to
we can go to Kismet. Sure.
We can
go to Hotep.
So let's go all the way. And I do use this term, and I hope people will embrace it. I always say enslavement and enslavement trade.
So do I.
Individuals were not born as slaves.
That's right.
It was an action to put them in that position.
That's right.
And forget about Aristotle, who said some men are born to be free, or some men are born to be slaves.
Right.
Aristotle messed up there, but I'm quiet here now. But enslaved, you can enslave any one of us, but I wasn't born in that category.
I know. I totally agree with you.
Franklin, what was
now it's called A Fistful of Shells. And the British historians, by the way, are very good on Africa. And that's a magnificent book. You can get it ebook, you can get it online, you can get it. The guy's name is Green. I think that's his surname. And he's at the University of London. I know him, I've talked to him. He's going to be involved in our project He's going to give a couple of lectures. We're going to read some of his books. So you're absolutely right, Bill, that we want to give the teachers a very broad perspective so they can figure out how to teach it so that it's impactful.
What was the other book that you held
Max,
up?
is that Baxter Smith? I was talking about you.
That's
Such
Baxter.
sweet thunder.
There's Baxter Smith. So sorry.
You held a book up and I
Oh,
think
this book is
Carter.
called Such Sweet Thunder by Vincent O. Carter.
Okay, thank you.
This is a writer, and I'm going to take 2 minutes. I didn't know anything about him until I'm a book collector, and I'm in a bookstore in Detroit, and I see this book that has this eye on it, and I just go look and I read it, and it said he went to Oxford, and then it said he went to Lincoln University, and it had PA, and I said, I'm going to buy it. So naturally, I bought it, and I struggled with it for 6 months, and I put it away, and 3 years later, I went back to it and I said, this is pretty good. And 5 years later, I'm a little bit older. And I thought, man, this is good. And he was a man who went to Lincoln. He was a philosopher. Mr. Wimbish, I don't know if you know Mr. Wimbish, our librarian, knew him and said he had a weird room with all these plants. And he wrote this very strange poetry at the Lincolnian, and he wrote short stories in the Lincolnian that no one understood. And Mr. Wimbish says he was really out there. So this guy goes to Detroit, gets a master's degree, and like most Black writers of his age, of his time, he heads off to Paris, gets into a fight with Richard Wright and all the Black writers in Paris about something. And then he goes to Bern, Switzerland, where he's the only Black man in Bern, Switzerland. And he lived there for the rest of his life. He died, I guess, in the 70s or 80s. He lived there for the rest of his life. He only went back to Kansas City once when his father died, and he went back to visit his mother. But he's from Kansas City, and this is an autobiographical novel about growing up in Kansas City. He could not get it published when he was alive because it didn't have the guts, the killing, and all the characteristics that publishers were looking for when they wanted to publish Black writing. So his widow spent years trying to get this published, and a guy in the States read it, loved it, and then he decided he'd get the rights. And I called him and we talked, and I ended up talking to his widow for like 3 hours. I did an interview with her about her, and she said she didn't like Lincoln because she didn't like the name. She didn't like his Ravel name. He had, and when you look him up in the Lincolnian, in his graduation book, I forget his Ravel name, but he has a Ravel name like Egghead or something like that. And I had to explain to her what a Ravel name was. It wasn't a negative thing. But so Vincent O. Carter is very important to the Lincoln University lexicon of outstanding writers. And the fact that he's not taught and not put up there with all of our other great writers is a great tragedy for him. So I'm going to try to do whatever I can to get the folks interested in teaching at least Such Sweet Thunder, because that's more accessible than the Bern book. And it's really brilliant writing. It's good writing. That's the important thing.
Brother Franklin, Greg Miller here, class of 77.
Sure.
I've met you a number of times, but
Yep.
This is the most detailed understanding and the longest I've ever heard you speak. As a matter of fact, when I saw that you were going to be on the lecture series, I tuned in.
Thank you.
In the time after you left your studies in England, had you ever identified any students from Lincoln that you wanted to bring along, say, and follow in your footsteps there?
Yes, I did. We have an African student from Kenya, Okello, who was from Lincoln. I met him. I talked to him. He was in grad school at Temple, and I said, man, you should do a DPhil at Oxford. I mean, you need to come out and do it. And I was going back and forth at the time, and flew over, got him an interview. He went to another college. He went to Magdalen College, which is a different college, but it's all the same. And he did very well and graduated. But one of the things, I still have some juice over there. And one of the things I'd love to do is try to get a couple of, well, first, we need to identify and get a farm team so we can apply for Marshall and Rhodes scholarships. And you just don't apply. It takes 2 or 3 years of serious prep for each generation of students. But in prepping a student for a Rhodes or Marshall or even a Woodrow Wilson fellowship, which I got, they're going to get something because they'll have all their paperwork, they'll have thought through their stories, they have got their grades, they'll make a good presentation. So yeah, I've definitely thought about it and would like to do more in that area.
Do you need a student intern of very high quality to come with your project this summer? A junior or senior English major who's top notch?
Yes.
Okay.
The answer is yes.
Great.
We'd love it because she would, it would be, our whole approach is how do we bring along? For instance, I have 3,000 books. I have to get rid of them. I'm at a point where it's time to deassess stuff. And so I've started a rare book section, an African-American section at the Free Library of Philadelphia, because they didn't have any African-American books in the rare book section. And then I have a good batch, my first edition, Du Bois's, blah, 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 that Freeman's Auction House is going to do an auction in 23. Now, what's so interesting about that is I brought 900 books to them. And these people are brilliant book people. And we had a Zoom call Friday. And they said, it took us a while to go through your books. And I'm ashamed to say, we didn't recognize 95% of them. And which is not good because that means they aren't going to get a lot of dough. And they said, once we got on Wikipedia and started looking up these writers, we're like, my God, how did we miss Rudolph Fisher, who wrote mystery novels in the 30s and the 40s, first edition with cover? We said, how did we miss these people? And I had no answer because I was totally floored. So what do? We are working with the library to understand that in the Black community, and particularly my generation, civil rights generations, we have the opportunity to any major library in the country to let someone come in, look at our books, take 2 or 3, and put them in a rare book special collection, okay? And help these libraries start getting Black books, African-American books in their special collections where anyone can come. They can't take them home, but they can really see the power of looking at Du Bois's Souls of Black Folks. You just look at it and turn it, or first edition Gwendolyn Brooks's Street in Bronzeville, all that stuff. It's important, that special collection. So we're taking an auction and we're going to have a series of lectures on Black collecting. We've already had one in February. I'll send you the link to it. It was very interesting with 5 collectors. And let me know, because I think you would like a professor lady. I'm seeing this. But what we need now, what we need now is to get 2 Black students that are doing masters in library science to come to Freeman's and to use the cataloging of my collection as a way to learn about the auction business, because there are so few African Americans involved in auctions. And it's very important that you have people that are knowledgeable, because if someone else that has a collection brings it to Freeman's, if you got a couple of black folks there and say, oh my God, a Rudolph Fisher, and they can write it up, then it becomes valuable to a larger market. So that's a project that I'm involved in at the moment. That'll be pretty exciting.
I have a quick question. I know you said that when it came to the books, that people could look at them, but they can't take them home. So is it going to be like online? Like, is it online?
No,
or
no,
something?
no.
'Cause
I
know,
mean,
like, a lot of times-
let me explain. When you have a rare books, and by the way, that's a very good question. When you have a rare books section of a public library or the Lincoln University Library, when you have a rare book section, you have first editions of very important books that people can come in and just look at, see how it was made, 1890s, 1850s, first edition Frederick Douglass's. You can always get these books online. You can get these books online, but there is a certain power in looking at, it's an intellectual, emotional power, and looking at a book that Frederick Douglass may have in fact sold directly to someone, because he sold his books when he was doing his lecture tours. So to just see how it's made and to feel it and look at it and get into the materiality of the book is itself a spiritual thing. So the job is to create these Black books and put them in a special collection so that you can come, you can read it online, but you would say, you know, I'd like to go and see what the book really looks like. And you can go and take a look at it. So that's sort of the project there. How do we get public libraries to realize that the Black community is a repository of some of these books that could seed their collection? Have you ever been to the basement of the Lincoln University Library, Miss Outerbridge?
Yes.
You know what that felt like, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
looking at Langston Hughes's writing desk.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Gave that to Lincoln. You sit there and read one of his books. It's really it's a spiritual experience, and it's one that is thinking people, no matter what field we decide, what career we have, we need to have, as Lincoln people, as educated, critically educated people, we still need to have the spiritual experience of dealing with our foreparents, with our intellectual foreparents.
Sir Franklin, Rob Johnson here.
Yeah, Rob.
How you doing, man?
Good, man.
Just a couple of quick questions for you. One, are you still in touch with people in Malawi by any chance?
I am.
Okay.
Tell me you've been there.
No, well, a former colleague of mine, Peter Mutharika.
Okay.
I don't know if he's still president or he was president. His brother was president of Malawi.
He was. I mean, I didn't know him, but yes, his brother was.
Right. And I think he served as president for a period of time as well.
Yeah.
So, but no, I spent a lot of time in South Africa, so I've been close.
I lived in Cape Town for 3.5 years.
Oh.
I mean, I came back and forth, but
Right.
my base was Cape Town.
Okay, and I spent a lot of time in Port Elizabeth.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
That's Mandela's hometown.
Mandela City.
Yeah, that whole Cape. Yep, Eastern Cape. Yep. Secondly, Dan Lambright was actually from Cleveland.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Donald Lambright was from. Did you know him at all?
Oh yeah, he was a part of our class. Yeah.
Yeah. He was he was a brilliant. Remember how brilliant he could be in our
Remember, he's a great musician.
Yes.
Wonderful.
But he decided he was in a cul-de-sac emotionally, and he decided the only way was to kill 10. But to be consistent, he had to kill his wife and then kill himself. I mean, that's right, Cleveland. I stand corrected.
And I don't. Are you familiar with any of the staff at the African American Museum in Philadelphia?
I am.
I have a classmate from high school, Richard Watson.
Oh, you mean Dr. Watson?
Yes, sir. Well, he's just like you, man. You be more. Okay, but yeah,
he's really a national treasure Richard Watson.
Yes.
He's a great man.
Sure. And did you visit Mark in Gambia by any chance? Have you done any work with Gambia?
Well, yeah, Mark Pivar, who was
Yeah.
actually on this call, is he married for you all that don't know, Susan Pivar's father taught us anthropology, and he was this thin man who would smoke a pipe. In those days, you could smoke. He would light a pipe in class and sit on this little stool and lecture us about different tribes. And he had the habit of writing backwards. And he was right. He had a habit. When he would put a name up, he would just lean back and write the name and come back in. Well, Mark married Susan Pivar. She went to Bryn Mawr. She's quite brilliant. And she got a fellowship to go study a group in Gambia. And Mark is also a brilliant guitarist. He showed up with a guitar and Hootenanny records. We're like, what is this? But we learned pretty soon that Bob Dylan was brilliant. And Mark, being a great guitarist, got in with kora players, griots, and he just really produced albums. He's got kora albums. The film we did is online, Alhaji by Conte. I think that's the name of it. And he has brought kora players. He's sent kora players all over America. He's been the one guy. And kora is interesting because it's a harp. And Alex Haley, when he was trying to figure out where Kunta Kinte was from, the term they had was that old African he called the guitar the ko, right? And Alex Haley used that to understand guitar, ko, kora. And that's how he found out where Kunta Kinte came from in Gambia. Because the griots there, remember, they go back hundreds of years with families. Mark became a kora master, brought by Kante to America. He lived in Philadelphia for a while. He played this beautiful music. And one day he says to me, let's do a film in Gambia. So we did. We went there. We went to Senegal. We did this film. We created I directed the film, produced the film, but he created this whole teachers program on the kora. It was fantastic. So again, two Lincoln people coming together to create something that's intellectually, historically, and culturally meaningful. It was a great experience.
Let me just say
actually, Pivar is on here today.
Senegal is my second home.
Is that your second home?
Yeah, Nangadef. Yeah. So
Magnifique. Nangadef, magnifique.
Magnifique.
We're speaking about Wolof. He's
Wolof,
just speaking
yeah.
Wolof here.
That's my second home, and I got family there too. Yeah.
That's really good, man. That's impressive.
So, but no, anyway, I'm very happy that and Mark and Susan are on the call right now.
Oh yeah.
But Susan's mother, Virginia Gunn, was a French teacher.
That's right.
She was my teacher. I set up an endowment at Lincoln for students who want to study culture and travel in her name and in Dr. Grubb's name.
Oh, nice.
And honor them. I mean, I set up an endowment to honor them because of their influence on me and many other students. So, but Mrs. Gunn got me into France right after I graduated from Lincoln in '67. So my summer of '67 was spent in France and then traveling through Europe. So that's thanks to Mrs. Gunn. So
I think that's perfect.
It wasn't just the father.
Yep. Mrs. Gunn was there too.
The whole family made contributions to Lincoln.
And Rob, I didn't even know about that endowment. I have to thank you. Wow.
Oh, well, Mark knew about it.
Oh.
Mark, come off of it, Mark. Tell your wife what's going on. But for the students, 50 years from now, you'll be in my position, talking to, students that'll be at Lincoln 50 years from now. And that'll be, I guess 2090 something and 2190 something. actually be 2170 something. And you'll be in the same position I'm in to reflect on your experience of the college, and most important, to meet folks like Baxter Smith and Joe Williams, and to meet people that you really spent a time in, the only time in your life where you're free to dream. And that's what the university experience is. Look at that, Cora. Do you see that, Cora? Hey, Mark.
see.
There it is.
Mark, do
Yeah.
you see that, Cora?
Oh, he's
Mark,
going to
pull
get
out.
his.
Oh,
He's
Mark's
gonna get his now, right?
Hey, Mark, get yours.
Oh,
Oh, wow.
Uh-oh, there's a Cora, guys.
play a
Wow.
note for us, Mark.
Yeah, play something.
Play,
something.
Mark.
Play something, Mark.
I just unmuted it. It's not really in tune.
That's all right. Show them how it sounds.
Yep.
That's
No,
amazing.
more.
That's amazing.
Another time when it's in tune.
Okay.
All right, Mark.
Mark, I thought you always brought your A game, man. You know, if we're going to talk about Cora, it should have probably been in tune. All right.
Yeah.
So M Button. So let me get
Oliver?
this straight. So Miss Dr. Buttons is M Button.
Yes, at lincoln.edu.
Okay, I'm going to send you the YouTube thing, and I'm also going to send you the proposal, which we are working on now, to get funded for this program, and we will get it funded.
Yeah, I have some students in mind I'd like to explore and
Okay,
I have
I'm
a
good.
question. You used a term related to the omega psi phi bacillus.
The bacillus, that's Greek. That's the
Like the
bacillus
president.
is the Greek term for the chief, the big cheese.
I see 3 of us on here now.
Yeah, 3 bacilluses on here, and you're supposed to,
Fred Ford.
Yep, Fred was bacillus. Who else was
I
bacillus?
was Bacillus also.
Greg, and bacillus is the guy that keeps everybody calm, make sure the brotherhood is going, and that they ring those bells for Sister Wilson.
And be more, my dad was a bacillus at Beta.
Oh my goodness.
I knew Sister Wilson,
Yep, I
and
love Sister Wilson.
Bishop Love was a frequent
Was
visitor in our home.
he as well? Good.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And
Bishop,
he brought my father from the Baptist church into the Methodist
he
church.
did the same thing with
Same
my
thing.
father.
Yep.
Did the same thing with my father.
Mm-hmm.
Bishop Love.
Bishop Love.
Yep. Edgar A. Love.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Well, it's been a joy to have you be
Well,
here.
it's been a pleasure. I've been,
Wow.
I mean, we've sort of gone over time, but
You are a
I have really
university
enjoyed it.
treasure. You are a treasure. And we just
I
so
have-
appreciate you.
Thank you.
Wow.
And when I know I can get back out on campus soon, it's been a
Yeah.
drag, kind of not being able to travel, but I've got, like most of us, I'm cool with my vaccinations. So you guys will see me back out there.
Bmore has been a wonderful supporter of Lincoln all through the years.
Well, I had a great time.
And he also had my
Great
back
talk.
when we were trying to save the historic buildings.
Amen. That's
Project.
right. That's right. And every 5 years, Black schools are Black educational institutions are interesting because we don't train people to go along to get along.
Mhm.
And that's why you have all this disruption in Black schools. Students are having walkouts and doing this and protesting because our historical legacy is to not go along to get along, but to bring about change. And every 5 years or 10 years, there's some big eruption at Lincoln. And my white friends say, "Oh, I hear Lincoln University is still in the news again," with a smirk. And I say, yes, and it will be in the news in another 3 years. Let me explain why. And I talk about the training Black people to be leaders means we were disruptors long before the digital term became currency as a disruptor. So let us not forget that on our Lincoln University journey.
Mhm.
And let me just follow very quickly with a point that you were making to the students. We represent a link between the 19th century and the 21st century.
Exactly.
And as you mentioned, in 50 years, the two students who are still on the line will be recounting how they heard these tales that stem back over a century. So it's not just 50 years forward, but many of us can remember at graduation when we had people coming from the classes of the 1890s.
Exactly. Exactly.
Graduation and homecoming. And so, that was 50, 60 years before our time. But we had those connections. And so they can report, because they're going to be the keepers and the carriers of this culture and the traditions that you talked about. And they're going to be the storytellers in the future. They're going to keep a lot of these images alive for us.
That's what our students are doing now. As a matter of fact, Mia, you want to tell Oliver who you're writing about? What year did he finish Lincoln?
So I'm writing about Reverend Dr. William A. Credit.
Good.
Yes.
Good.
And what year did he graduate?
I believe he graduated 1865.
Wow.
Wow.
So that's a long stretch of time.
Wow. That's fabulous. Is Houston Hall operating at all? Or is it still sitting there? Just don't tear it down. You'll get the money. Just don't tear it down.
Right. That's what we're
hoping. I lied. Reverend William Dr. A. Credit graduated the class of 1885. Sorry.
Okay, good. That's fine.
Not 65, 85.
Okay.
And
he had that Baltimore connection. I didn't know whether it be more.
Oh yeah, sure. I've heard of him.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, again, thank you so much.
Okay, guys.
You've done a wonderful job. And I know.
Hold on, Carol.
Okay.
Oh no. Well, yes, thank you. Yes, first of all, we only have
Dwight Murph, the man.
Yes, Mark, everybody. Baxter Smith, hello to you.
Baxter Smith.
One important thing that I want to say, I was a freshman when he was a senior. So it's important that you have all these great role models. In other words, it was a tradition of men that as a freshman, we had to follow. People like Albright, Baxter Smith, Sam Anderson.
Right. That's right.
Roderick Ireland.
That's right.
There are a lot of you. And so, Rob Johnson, we're following in your footsteps. And so it's important that that the two students know that you have a tradition to follow. And also on that trip to Africa, my girlfriend went with Mark and B. Moore to Africa. I know all about that trip.
Is this the one that went to Harvard?
Yes, Lenore, right. I know, that's right.
Man, Lenore was terrific.
Right. Well, I'll tell you all the story about Lenore. I was on my way to California. This is just a little history. She graduated from Harvard and she was at NBC.
That's right.
And on our way, I was driving to California. True story. And this was in the 70s. And we were going to California and she was supposed to go by Walper Studios. And guess who she was talking to? The people who wrote Roots. She was going to get involved.
Really?
Right.
That's right.
Bad Roots. But anyway, that's just a side.
She was strong, man.
Yes,
Lenore was strong. We loved her, man. She was strong.
Well, I didn't marry her, but she was strong.
That's all right. She was strong.
She was.
Isn't she, Dwight? I think I looked her up, and she's in California now. Doing.
Yeah, she's in California now. Yes, she is.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to get in touch with her then.
Oh yeah. Well, I can arrange that.
All right, Lenore. She was good.
Right.
We didn't know many Black people going to Harvard back in those days.
How about that? Right. How about that? That was when they started letting them in. Anyway.
Yeah.
But anyway, Baxter. Yes.
I want to. Oh, Baxter. I want to hear Baxter.
You got to unmute, man.
He's unmuted.
You're unmute. Wait, get near the microphone, Baxter. No.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a shame.
Throw that man a tennis ball. he'll come alive for real.
Can he put something in the chat just to give us?
Oh yeah, that's an idea. Hey Baxter, chat. Use the chat box. Yeah, Mia, go ahead. Oh, you didn't have your hand up? Okay, no problem.
What's her last name?
French, Lenore French,
Lenore French.
He said, what part of Cali is she in?
L.A.
If I could speak up.
Speak up, P.
Yeah, I wanted to just the way I'm hearing, if you listen to the big picture of what Oliver is saying, and this is something for the students to share with other students. He said something pretty powerful. He said that when you're at Lincoln, when you're in this time of your life, it's a time that you can dream. It's a time you can dream. And I got to tell you that all the people on this call, to some extent or another, and Oliver is such an example of it. If you can keep that dreaming habit through your life, where someone says, well, you know, this instrument is really nice, and wouldn't it be nice to make a film about this? Now, this is, people, you got to understand that Seymour had not really done much in film. He wasn't like a Hollywood guy, wasn't trained in film, neither was I. And yet, by dreaming and not saying, oh, we can't do this, or
don't say that.
It's just by saying, wow, and then just following it and having faith that it's going to go somewhere. We made this little film that to this day is still being shown, and they teach from it at the London at the School of Oriental and African Studies in London. The film is like, it's like used as a basic reference. The other thing was we did something called, this is two sides of the same coin. Peter Spencer, The Lasting Connection.
Oh, right.
The son of a minister did the research. We did the research together. We did, and he brainstormed, he storyboarded, he imagined all the different scenes, and we recruited, he recruited all the actors and got it all together.
That was great.
Docudrama in Wilmington, Delaware.
Right.
That includes the current president making an extemporaneous, wonderful brief speech. Wonderful. What he says is an inspirational brief speech about what a person can accomplish when they face adversity and they dream, and they take the power of the dream into life, and they don't get bitter, and they don't do all these things. And so this was another thing that happened, and that story, it's all about dreams. So
perfect.
What's the name of the film again?
One of the things that I
Peter Spencer, Spencer. He did the first church before Mother Bethel, but he stayed in Delaware, and of course Mother Bethel, went all over the world. The AMEs. He was the what AUME, African Union Methodist Episcopal Church.
Yeah. So it's just like, it's this theme that Oliver has lived out. Who would imagine the son of a minister would end up helping to create a fund, reinvest in South Africa?
Exactly.
That helped a whole nation.
That's right.
Attract the capital needed so that, once you get your independence, you got to build an economy.
Right. Have a good sleep, but get up at 6 a.m. the next morning because the real work starts.
Oh yeah, I want to say one thing. On May 23rd, I want you guys, all you Lincoln guys, know that Dr. Hamilton is going to receive an honorary degree. So be there.
From Lincoln?
Yes. I'm in
contact. My God, May 23rd?
May 23rd. I'm in contact with him. So
thank you.
And Oliver, May 21st, Emory Wimbish will receive an honorary degree.
Oh my God. Great.
Why all the different dates, Carol?
Well, this year, because last year's class did not get a graduation, they're doing both graduations.
Oh, good.
One on Friday and one on Monday.
Good.
Okay, thank you.
Sunday.
Okay.
On Sunday.
Did I say I meant Sunday? Yes.
Dr. Franklin, I really am impressed. You must have reinvented yourself 20 times since you graduated from Lincoln, and that's amazing. That's
well,
totally
you got to
amazing.
keep it. You have to keep. Life is short, and you got to keep it interesting, and you got to learn something new all the time.
Yeah,
you
totally,
got to
totally
learn
impressed, brother. Totally
you got to
impressed.
learn something new all the time.
Carol, I'm going to sign off, but
now,
I want to get Oliver's address and stuff.
Yeah, she's got it. But I'm going to say one thing before I go. because that's all I've been talking about, Harry and Meghan. Okay.
Oh, yes.
Oh, I was gonna ask
And Harry and Meghan. When Harry married her, he thought everything was cool. She's the only member of the royal family that has ever earned her own money. And then when she saw the virtual, the racism coming at her from the British public, I mean, that's letters and things like that, and then the tabloids, all of a sudden, Harry woke up. Like he said, he'd been living in a dream world. He didn't understand. And when his son was born, they had a cartoon in one of the tabloids of a couple leaving the leaving the nursery with a chimpanzee in a stroller. And that was pretty much the straw that broke the camel's back. And what he was pissed off about most was that members of the royal family never complained. So the Queen, who could have sent a sternly worded note to the press saying, this is out of bounds, did not do it because she felt her constitutional role, she couldn't do it. So then they decided to split and leave the UK because he could no longer guarantee her safety there. So it's quite, and it has really shaken up the monarchy in ways that we will understand moving forward. But this has been a major shakeup. Harry got religion. He married a black woman, and even a woman that could be white. So all the black folks in Britain were saying, you can't even be white enough for the royal family. So let's wish them well. I hope they will come back because she can do a lot of good because so much of the royal family is dealing with the Commonwealth. And the Commonwealth is 80% people of color.
Part of the diaspora.
Yeah, that's what he said in Oprah. He said, you know, Meghan is a great asset. What I'm disappointed about is that no one understood what a great asset this is. So we'll see what's going on. If they come down this way, I'll certainly try to get them out to Lincoln at some point.
Cool.
I think students would like to meet him.
That would be great.
Wow.
If they come here, I got to get them here first.
Yeah.
And then get them out, or get a group to come in to meet them. You know, a select group or something to make it. Yeah, I think they should. All right, gang.
Thank you again.
All right.
This
Thank
has
you
been
so
superb.
much. Yes.
Good seeing you all.
All
God
right.
bless. God bless
I
everyone.
have a question for Professor Button and Sister Carol.
Yes.
Okay. So will y'all be uploading this? Because I know like the past few videos haven't been like uploaded on YouTube.
Yeah, they will be uploaded. Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely. I think there's only one other that hasn't been. I had some trouble accessing Canvas, but I resolved it.
Okay, cool. And then did you get my email about the paper?
I don't think so.
I sent it on Sunday.
Oh, I don't think I did. For me or to Dr. Button?
No, I sent it to you. I sent it to both of y'all.
I'll certainly look for it.
Okay.
All right. Glad. All right, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thanks you again.
I think B More is gone, but thanks again. And thank you all for being with us this afternoon.
Yes.